Just keep them all in one place.
Okay, Mr. Chair, you are live.
All right. Well, hello all. I hope we'll have a few more people joining us. Who do we have? I'm not even sure who we have here right now. Switch to camp. Oh, there we go. There's Amy. Hi, Amy. Okay, so we have the bare minimum quorum here. So I guess the first thing we have to do, I guess we have to hand it back to you, Krista, because we have to do elections, yeah?
We do have our land acknowledgement. I can put it in the chat if you would be able to do that first, and also go through to determine who's in the meeting, roll call, and then we can move over to election of chair and vice chair.
Okay, so we want to read the land acknowledgement in, do we?
Yes, we are doing that as per council recently approved a motion to have that included in all of the meetings and administrative order 1 to be included.
All righty then. The Halifax Region Municipality, oh, here she is located on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional land of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Okay, roll call. Who do we have here? Mike Lamplew here, former chair, maybe current chair, maybe future chair.
Daryl Cooling, vice chair.
And
I'm Councillor Patty Cuttle, representing District 11, which includes Spryfield, Sambro Loop, and the Prospect Road communities.
okay, and Amy, you have to unmute there.
Hello, so Amy Hawken. I'm here as an interest group nominee for the Resource Opportunity Center.
And we got Jane there. You're mute. You're still muted, Jane. Ah, there you are.
There we go. Yes, Jane McNeil representing the Timberley community.
Okay. Anybody else there?
Hey folks, Gareth Evans here from Parks and Recreation Strategic Planning and Design. I'm a recreation planning specialist and overseeing the, I suppose, the overall implementation of the master plan.
Hey, Gareth.
We also have Hamad has joined the meeting and Michael Weil has joined the meeting.
Okay. Do they wish to say hello?
Hi, this is Hamad. I'm the newly reappointed member. Thanks.
Welcome, Hamad.
All right, Michael, I'll assume the chair and I'll call for nominations for call for nominations for the election of chair. Are there any nominations?
Well, if he was willing, I would nominate Mike again.
Yes.
Is there a seconder?
I will second.
that.
Okay, Michael, I assume you would accept the nomination?
I will. Not as much as a surprise this year as last year, so but I will, yes.
Okay, I'll call 3 more times if there's any further nominations. Any further nominations? Any further nominations? I would just look for a motion now to cease nominations.
I move that we cease nominations.
I will second that.
Okay, it's been moved, seconded to cease nominations. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so Michael, you have been elected the chair for the committee. Congratulations. Did you want me to proceed with election of vice chair, or would you like to take over?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can move on now. Thank you all for your vote of support. And I'd like to lead off by nominating Daryl as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any other nominations? And for the third time. All right, I call cease of nominations for vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, welcome, Daryl.
Yep.
Thank you, Daryl.
Nope.
Okay, so now where do we move on to now? So we have to election vice chair, community announcements. Do we have any community announcements from anybody here that they'd like to bring forward? Okay, yeah, we have a number of things added over the last week or so to our agenda. So it's going to be a slightly longer meeting than normal, which will be interesting because we get to hear other people besides ourselves. But I guess you would start off with approval of the meeting, the last meeting, which, good heavens, it was a while ago. It was back when it was actually warm outside, August 25th. Hopefully everybody's got a copy of this and has had a chance to look through the minutes. Does it meet everybody's approval?
Yes.
Okay. No issues with it? Okay, so the minutes from August 25th are approved. Very good. So now we have the,
Sorry, Mike, just a point of order here. Krista, do you need an official, like, when we approve minutes in the committee like this, do we need to?
Yes, we need a mover and a seconder to approve the
Yeah.
minutes.
oh, okay, sorry,
Okay.
jumping ahead. Do we have anybody would like to move to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
A
I will
second.
second.
Yep.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you all. So approved. Okay, so. So now we have, I guess 731 present, we're
No, we
dealing
have
with,
a approval of the order of business, and then
Yeah.
we have declarations of conflict of interest and a couple others before we get to the
oh,
presentation.
yep.
Yeah.
Geez, I'm jumping down the list. Jesus, more dang things on this. Okay, so we have approval of order of business. So we have additions, things have been added in here. Is everybody in favor of this? Are there anybody, do we have to move and second this too?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, is this an meet everybody's approval, or does anybody have any thoughts?
I will move the motion.
Thank you. Seconder?
Happy to second.
Okay,
Uh,
call for a vote. Everybody approve the minutes?
Right.
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay,
Approving the order of business, right?
the order, yeah.
Or-
Our agenda for tonight.
Right. Okay.
So, does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything that's being presented here today or this evening? Okay, that sounds good. Do we have any deferred business? I'm not aware of any, but if somebody has a better memory than I.
There's none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, pardon? There's none?
There's no deferred business, no.
Thank you, Krista. So do we have any petitions, correspondence, or delegations?
So the clerk's office has received no correspondence and no petitions.
Okay. So I guess we move on to presentations at this point in time.
Okay, I will just promote our presenters, and we are going to be sharing their slides here momentarily.
Okay.
Steve Adams, if you can hear me, I'm trying to promote you and you'll receive a, there we go.
Hi, it's Greg here. I think Steve's trying to get in.
Yeah, are we good now?
You are good to go and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I apologize for not getting in on time. My mouse fell on the floor and it kind of disintegrated. I had to put it back together. My name's Stephen Adams. I'm along with Greg Zwicker. We represent MLP developments, as you can see by the first slide here. And they are business people in the Goodwood area, schooner contracting, coastal restoration, a number of other businesses. And we have a proposal this morning that we're bringing forward to the Western Common Advisory Committee because there's some interest here in what we are doing. If you go to the next, and this is just an overview. If you look at the top there, that one piece, that is the compost facility, and the area that is brownish gray is part of the Drysdale Pond. Next slide, please. So this is basically an outline of the 6 PIDs that are under discussion. Now, all of the lands are zone RB1, which is residential. What the proposal is to rezone 4 of the PIDs to Western Common, and that's no less than 189 acres, and to redesignate and rezone part of this to industrial under I1. And if this is successful, those lands will be given to the municipality as part of Western Common. Next slide, please. So if you look at the area, the coral area, those are PIDs, and bear in mind that these are just estimates. We haven't carved out the parts that would be turned over to HRM for their uses. And these are, as you can see, there's some in that middle PID, which is coral. That has some of the Drysdale bog lands, which our clients are not interested in keeping. They want to give that over to HRM, and with the appropriate setbacks. So that is that would be the layout to a degree, and then of course the coral part will be smaller. The green part, which is Western, or hopefully zoned Western Common, will be bigger. If you look to the left of this, you'll see that longer strip. That would be that's a road. That is actually a very well built road that would allow another entrance to the Western Common. It would have to go across that particular easement and have an opportunity for a trailhead for the Western Common. Next slide, please. So when individuals see industrial, you think of the Mad Max situation with all the smoke and the steam, and just not a very appropriate looking, or not a very attractive landscape. Under the I3 uses, almost anything would go. And this was the genesis for the rezoning in 2011, 2012, that there was a proposal for an asphalt plant, and local residents were opposed to it. Long and short of it, it did not come to fruition, and the lands were zoned residential. If you look at the left-hand side under I1 uses, presently, MLP, that group, with, as I said earlier, coastal restoration, a number of other smaller businesses, they operate in that zone of I1 on Mills Drive, number 8, and they are looking to put their business, consolidate all their business from the Prospect Road area to this, the lands they like to have rezoned to I1, which for their intents and purposes are manufacturing, warehouse operations, and general contracting and storage yards. So it's a benign use, given that in 25 plus years, there's not been one complaint against this company or the group of companies. They have an impeccable record. You look at their building, and Councillor Cuttle was there. It's a beautiful stone. They've also done work around the city, and some of the ones which we're most familiar would be City Hall. And the last slide, please. So as you can see here, January 6, 2011, there was a public information meeting held in the Prospect Road area, PFTC. And you can see there are 8 speakers, and Mr. Lamplu, chair, asked why HRM doesn't buy the land as conservation land to protect it. That's what we're here to do, or at least to propose. And this is a presentation to give the Western Common Advisory Committee a professional courtesy of what we are proposing. This is a small first step in many. There are many moving parts to this, and we have submitted our application for this. But as you can see, there are, of these individuals, 7 of the 8 all asked why HRM doesn't buy the land or protect it or take ownership of it or whatever the case may be. And I've just consolidated the notes from that particular meeting. So it's basically what we're trying to do is incorporate what was requested in the meeting of January 6th. When the public hearing was held, there were 2 local residents, or 1 local resident, 1 resident from down the road a bit, who spoke in favor of the rezoning to residential. So that puts it in. So in summary, this entire rezoning from industrial to residential came about as a threat of an asphalt plant. The present property owners would like to consolidate their business on, as we discussed in the on those earlier maps, so that they can maintain their business in the Prospect Road area as opposed to having to move, because they're spread out all over the place, and the weight restrictions in the spring really play havoc on their ability to operate. So I'm not sure if Greg has anything to add, but I'll turn it over to him.
I think for us, this is a planning application. Thea Langell, HRM, has our application letter. So we have to go through plan amendments, development agreement. It's quite a process to change the zones and change the uses permitted there. So we'll be looking for staff report eventually, which would go to a community council and then a regional council. So when Steve says there's a lot of process to go, it's the HRM plan amendment process with a development agreement. So lots of engagement, lots of community involvement to come on that. And we're just waiting for a response from planning staff before we do anything further. This is an information item for you guys to say, this is a real file now, and looking for a bit of feedback on what it would mean for you and for the park. So I guess it's going to pass the mic to you to see if you've got some questions or comments, and happy to respond.
I guess I have a quick question here. In your map where you had the 2 different colors when you showed us the area with the wetland there, can we bring that back up, and can you sort of walk me through? I wasn't sure which ones the client currently owns and which ones are HRM yet.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Can we point at all, or we don't have control? I guess Ross has. Oh, there's somebody's hand.
Oh, there you go.
Somebody's got a mouse. You fixed it, Steve.
So if you put the mouse right down the left along that where the WC is, right at where it hits the Prospect Road, right up there, right? Okay, good. Go up to the top to the black dashed line, right? And the black dashed line, that's like a little roof, if you will. Follow that black dashed line. Perfect. Right down to the Prospect Road, or down as far as you get. That's an easement. Keep coming down.
All the pink.
On the black dash line. Okay, go to your right. So just go up to your you're right up to the top. Go back up to the top again there. Perfect. Okay. Now, your little hand on the black dash line.
All that dark pink with the labels in it and the green
Yep.
boxes with the labels in it.
Right. So those 5 PIDs, Mike, if you come right down, you'll see right to the bottom where the light and the dark meet. All that area encompassed is owned by MLP developments.
Okay, so basically all the rows and all the green.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, anyone could have said it that way, I suppose. Yes.
And so the road you spoke of on the west,
Yes, on the left
southwest
side.
is that the one running just up beside that red line at the western boundary?
Yes, up to the
Of the
easement.
southwest?
That's goes right up to that easement. That's right.
I think you see
Okay,
it on the first slide if you want to see the aerial. You can kind of see that road coming in. Straight
Oh,
road
Okay.
goes right back by the wetland.
okay, so what is back that there's something there just 2/3 of the way up to the north of that? That's a gravel spot or
I
something?
think that's old gravel area, old pit area. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
And
that's
so-
where the parking lot could go. I suppose that might be a good location to enter the.
So that road is on the client's land too?
Yes.
Okay.
It is the property line, the left edge of it.
So it's a substantial piece of land.
It's over 300 acres.
So basically if I understand this correctly, the essence of this is he wishes to give over the wetlands to HRM. And at the same time, as long as the lands that he wants to use are changed to light industrial rather than staying residential.
Yes, and it's not only Drysdale bog lands, Mr. Chair, but there is usable land in there as well. But if the Drysdale bog lands are put in public ownership, they'll be protected in perpetuity. And, you know, and that was what we heard in 2011 in January from residents. They wanted the lands turned over to HRM, and turning it over to HRM or public ownership, there's no cost. It's an exchange.
It certainly seems like an interesting proposal, and you're bringing my words from 11 years ago back. That's pretty clever there, Steve.
Well, you know, they're on the record. I was when I went through the minutes, I was shocked at the amount of support for this, and it was not meant to embarrass you or to put you in a bad spot. A number of residents brought that forward, so it's appropriate. And again, this is an initial meeting. This is our first public presentation, but we found it fitting to have the Western Common Advisory Committee have the first look at it.
Well, it certainly sounds to me at first blush very positive. It certainly seems reasonable at first blush to me anyway. I probably need to know more. I don't know enough about land use and everything else and what the implications there are at all.
What's the setbacks off of the bog area?
Generally, they're 20 meters, but with this land, if it's seeded over, the lower part will have right down to Prospect Road.
Yeah.
And we will. It's according to how everything is configured, but I can assure you that we'll have buffers exceeding what is required. By how much, I'm not sure, but we'll do the maximum amount possible as long as our clients are able to get, be able to relocate their business and ensure that the jobs are kept in the area.
Is it your client's view that all the land that would be rezoned for his use or for industrial use would be used by his group of companies, or would he be looking at this as a business venture to sell some of this off for other companies?
His exclusive use, and as I said earlier, the lands that are in pink or coral I have, that's the maximum amount. You'll see that it'll go toward or to encapsulate all of the I guess the area that's looks like the swampy area, the bog area, that will all be green once we're finished. That is our intent.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note for the members in the committee that the chat can be used to request to speak. And I believe Councillor Cuddle has requested to speak on this matter as well.
Please, Patty.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I mean, the Drysdale Bog, from what I've heard, was when they were proposing the asphalt plant, it was a very contentious proposal, and protecting the bog was definitely what the community was hoping for. I mean, nowadays, you can't develop on a bog. It's protected. It is a protected wetland. So I'm just wondering, when we met before, and by the way, I love the people at Coastal. I love their business. I'm really impressed with the work that they do in the stone cutting and everything. So I'm very supportive of them as a business and wanting to keep them here. When we last spoke, there was a proposal around like essentially selling the land. Is that still the proposal, to sell the land?
Councillor, which land is that?
The bog, well, the original proposal when we spoke last time was doing a land swap for the Drysdale Bog for property off of Evergreen Place.
That's old. That was a different idea at the time.
Okay, so that idea. So the idea here now is, are they interested in donating the land,
Right.
and in exchange for rezoning a portion of the land to be able to situate their business?
Councillor Cuddle, that is my presentation in about 14 seconds. So I should have, that's exactly it.
All right. Okay. Just wanted to clear, because it's been a while since we spoke about it. So I just wanted to get on the same page here. All right. Thank you.
We don't need a recommendation or direction from your committee. It's basically an information item. I think the next stop you would probably see this councillor would be some sort of initiation of a plan amendment. So it's a little ways away before it needs actual council direction.
Right. But yeah, no, I think it's great that you've presented here at the Western Common Committee, because definitely, has some bearing on what happens with the Western Common lands, and it is an important wetland.
Yes, I certainly appreciate Stephen, you and Greg presenting here and giving us your proposal. As you say, you don't have to do this, but it's certainly much appreciated that you wanted to come and advise us of what the proposal is.
We could bring it back. Oh, sorry, I was going to say we could bring it back if things start moving and the planning department is starting to process it. We could come back and engage with you again, kind of through the process. This is just the first glance at it, and as things progress, it might be appropriate to come back and have maybe a bit of a deeper dive with you if you're interested.
Personally, I think that would be really interesting. There's another report that we're hearing about that's got larger implications on the Western Common than yours.
Oh, okay.
And it may be, in looking at all of these together, we may want to, I'm not sure how it's a lot coming at us all of a sudden. So I'd certainly appreciate hearing more later. And is it possible that on our minutes, when they come out, Krista, can you include their presentation so we have some visuals of what we have here? I hadn't seen what you were proposing, the layout prior
Yes,
to.
so Mr. Chair, that presentation was circulated to members, and also we will be posting it online tomorrow, hopefully, halifax.ca is down at the moment. So we will do our best once the site is up and running again to get that information online for the public as well.
Okay, I thought I printed and looked at everything that came out, but
It may have
apparently
been a little later. I apologize. There was quite a lot coming out at the last minute, and that was when I think you received 3 updates from me through Outlook. So
I don't think I printed it all. Apparently not. Anyway,
Are we able to stay on to watch the next item to see how things might fit together? Is
yes,
that appropriate?
absolutely. We'll just be moving you back to an attendee role. So you won't
Sure.
have the option to
Yep.
speak, but you can observe.
Thank you.
thank you, gentlemen.
Can I ask add one last point, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chair. Also, just Jane also would like to speak too when Steve is finished his point.
Oh, thank you, Madam Clerk. We'd like to come back with a more refined proposal. So the 2 PIDs, as you see there, the 2 rose-colored ones, it would more reflect or better reflect the land that we would be given to HRM. So the Drysdale Bog aspect in the swampy area there would move, that line would move to the east and encapsulate all of that. So you'll see a more accurate reflection of the lands that are to be zoned Western Common, which would be more than shown there, and those that are to be zoned light industrial, which would be less. So we'll have that prepared. When it comes time, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, I'd certainly appreciate seeing your more refined plan. And yes, Jane.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that maybe as soon as the weather's suitable, it might be really helpful to have a field visit to the site, because there's nothing like seeing things, and we've all been cooped up and locked up enough. It would feel so good just to get out and walk that site. If when you guys are ready to give us an update, we could have perhaps have the session right on site. I would definitely appreciate that.
You could meet our clients, the MLP group that Patty met, or Council Cuttle met, sorry, last time. We could introduce you to them and you can get that relationship started.
That would be great.
Would maybe by the latter part of May, maybe?
Yeah, we see what the weather does here in Nova Scotia. And
well, that's why I'm saying May.
Who knows?
or I'm thinking we maybe do it sooner rather than later, just in case we go back into some lockdown. We've got
That's
freedom
true.
coming. Gotta get out there.
The 2 days between snowstorms and black flies, whatever that Wednesday is, we'll meet right in there.
There.
Thank you for the time.
I move that.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, well, that was very interesting. Much appreciated. So we have Western Common Wilderness Common Master Plan. Gareth, you seem to have the next bold letters on my agenda here. Are you ready for going front and center, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me well? All right. So ultimately, our marching orders came from you folks through the community council and then through regional council to ultimately land on what we're going for trail type throughout the Western Common. It's put us in a good spot where we're really in the midst of writing a report to get it back. It sent us in a really great direction so that we can understand accessibility and inclusion a lot better when it comes to the Western Common. Obviously, it's been an approach which we've been trying to figure out so that we can create that balance of fostering the natural setting as best we possibly can, while being as accessible and inclusive as possible. So with that all being done, we are continuing to work on the report, getting it back, and I believe it's slated for some point in June to get back, either to community council or regional council. But it's the discussions which have happened here that have led to further discussions with folks through our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, talking to specialists that are in accessible recreation, understanding of all the accessibility standards, all the while considering what the priorities are of the master plan. We're really trying to take this in direction so that whenever there is an amendment or an addendum to the master plan, it's very clear cut moving forward, whoever is interpreting it, what the objectives are and what sort of trail types can be selected to make sure it's a positive and enjoyable experience for all trail users. That's the extent of my update today.
Patty, Councillor Cuddle.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Gareth, for the update. So it's good to hear that this is being shopped around, and what I gather from what you're saying is that moving in the direction of redefining the trail types is being received well, and that we can anticipate some changes there, which is great. I'm just curious if you could just, I know there's not a report, but just, in terms of the accessibility folks, what was the reaction? Because I was wondering how that would be received.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. So we still have some additional meetings which we want to undertake. Preliminary research, preliminary discussions are being received well because of what the intention and the spirit of the master plan, to ensure that we have the utmost accessibility in mind and inclusivity of this all. I think one of the big challenges that we've always had in general with the Western Common Master Plan is there's some sections of it which are highly prescriptive, and there's some sections of the master plan which are highly interpretive. And it's our responsibility to interpret them appropriately with today's lens as far as access and inclusion are concerned. And it's so much more than a trail standard is what we're learning. And I genuinely don't think we're coming to folks in the accessibility community and saying, well, sorry, we're out of luck here. It's about having a conversation which ensures that when we do develop trails which are accessible and inclusive, we're doing them well above what we should be doing or what is set as a guideline. That's the conversations which we're having. So it's not just sub 5% grade and 6 foot wide. It's ensuring that we have the appropriate amount of rest stops in place. It's the appropriate amount of railings in place. Even one of the big discussions that we've always had was around switchbacks to manage trail grade when the topography changes. And those switchbacks are great for managing grade. They're confusing for people that may be blind or visually impaired. So it addresses one issue but creates another. So really, the conversations are ongoing, but they're valuable and fruitful and received well so far.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's great to hear.
Is there anything for colorblind people done?
Nothing that we've specifically landed on for a colorblind, but there's always things that we're learning within the spectrum of blind and visually impaired folks. So any of those interpretations or anything that we could add to it, we'd be looking to undertake that.
Thank you.
So Gareth, in your discussions, I'm hoping that you're not trying to come up with trying to write something that describes any possible combination of trails or accessibility or not accessible or camp or trail or hiking trails. It's sort of going to be more general than coming in with a tight prescription, like there has to be 8% of trails have got to be at least this and 22% of trails have to be that. Is that the sort of stuff you're looking at, or you're just talking about much more broadly?
Thanks for the question. More broadly, not as prescriptive to meet a certain percentage or a certain length of trail. What we're really trying to get to is whatever trails we are ensuring are accessible and inclusive, they optimize the experience. So it's, like I said, it's not just about width and grade. It's about the sincerity, I would say. It's more of an intangible, and it's more about getting your user out onto a trail to experience something that is inclusive and accessible for everyone, not just design, checking a box and moving on from there. So I know it doesn't necessarily answer your question, but it's more of a broad sweeping approach of, we look for opportunities where we can create meaningful experiences that are accessible and inclusive, and beyond that, any of those loops or segments of trail which are accessible and inclusive, we would be looking to obviously preserve the wilderness as much as possible, hence it being the Western Wilderness Common.
That sounds like a reasonable approach, where the topography allows you to make it accessible, enjoyable by all, without going through too much work to put switchbacks in or anything. Then it can be accessible and enjoyable by all. But where it's a rougher terrain, then we're moving into more of a backwoods trail type approach. And that makes it much more affordable to pull together as well.
Yeah, so is that correct, Gareth? Is that we're still looking at a combination of trail types?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. If you really delve into the master plan, it says two different things within a matter of sentences. Where one says it'll be largely backcountry 2-foot wide trail, which is developed with found materials. So what's on site. But then also it says largely it will be 6-foot wide barrier free. So that's one of those instances where the master plan is a little more subjective and interpretive than we may want it to be, because it's telling you two different things that are very, very different from one another. But it talks about at least having a network of barrier free trail, which when you start to interpret what the network looks like, it looks like it would go from Ragged Lake all the way down to Prospect and maybe up to the 103 and connecting up to parts of Timberley. What we're learning, at least from a construction standpoint, early days, and when we have had consultants out there looking at our changes in topography, that's not a feasible or realistic approach without developing the trail to be significantly disruptive. So now we're looking at a combined approach where we have segments of trail which will be accessible and inclusive to create more loops that are still enjoyable and challenging experiences, but not necessarily creating an entire network of barrier-free throughout the whole Western Common.
Just another question, Gareth. I'm just wondering, I guess, will the work that you're doing kind of define as clearly as it can that the process that will have to be gone through when you are developing a certain section of trail? Will it be clear how you kind of marry those, not marry, but how you kind of manage those two desires, I guess?
Yeah, so we won't necessarily be mapping out specific sections.
No, I'm thinking more the process that has to be gone through so that we don't have to revisit it every time.
Oh,
like every
yeah,
time we go to develop a new section of trail, it's like we're trying to, get the best combination of making it accessible, but making it environmentally friendly in terms of development and cost effective. And I'm just thinking we don't want to have to revisit that process every time. It would be nice if that, the steps we have to go through to get to how the trail will be developed should be defined, I think.
Yeah, this speaks to the process throughout. This will be the process now. So it'll be look for opportunities to create barrier-free, inclusive and accessible trails at trailheads based on the topography where it permits. And then
so would that be a contractor's decision or a city engineer, developer's decision, or who makes that judgment?
But done through Parks Capital.
Okay.
It would be the interpretation, and then the contractor would work with Parks Capital.
Okay.
All right, and I have one final I have one, I say it's one final question. It's never a final question. But, you know, back to like, you know, the past year, which was a strange year. And I just, you know, want to say thank you, Gareth and Mike and Hamad and Darren and everyone who was here last year, kind of struggling through this strange time of trying to figure out really, you know, where are we with this project and how are we moving it forward? And a year later, we find ourselves in this position where we do have this full agenda all of a sudden, and you know, all these pressures that are going to be impacting this common. You know, we have the Ragged Lake industrial park expansion that we're going to hear about. We have this proposal for that we just heard around, you know, possibly adding lands or you know, looking at how the bog might fit into the picture. We have there's a submission for a site-specific amendment for Exhibition Park, which could create a large community very nearby this Western Common. At the same time, you know, there's environmental pressures from development happening up around Timberley. So I feel like, you know, there is some urgency in trying to get some clarity around where we're going with this park, around what, you know, defining what this park is. And in that, wondering, Gareth, if there's any timeline or path forward that you might be able to share with us at a future date to say, okay, this is where we are now. This is where we're going next. Here are the things that are going to be impacting us as we go. I mean, just, you know, the industrial park expansion, for example. I mean, that, you know, depending on what happens there, that could have a huge impact on what gets done with the Western Common, not only in where trailheads go and parking and how it knits into, you know, the potential development around exhibition grounds. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, one hand, it feels like, oh my God, all this other stuff is happening, but I don't want it to set us too far back in moving forward with our concept and our plan. So I guess I'm looking for some kind of a path forward for this next year to say, we have this new committee, we have these new committee members. Like, if we were to say, like, what do we want to accomplish in this next year? Like, you know, I guess I'd look to my committee members as well to say, like, you know, where do we want to get with this master plan? I mean, that's the primary purpose that we're here meeting every so often.
If I could just jump in. I don't think we're doing any any significant revisions to the master plan. The spirit of the master plan remains the same. There are some addendums which will have to be put into the master plan, potentially, depending on the direction of community council and regional council. But the plan stays the same largely. That's what I can speak to. But as far as the purview of the committee, that would be something that would be discussed here. And then as long as it fits within the administrative order, that's the purview of the committee.
Yeah, and so it's not like revising the master plan in its entirety that I'm talking about. I'm just like wondering where, you know, if we're to say, like, where do we want to be in a year? Like, where are we going to be in a year with the master plan?
Yeah, I'd like to see us moving down the line a little faster than we have for the last while, that's for sure. But we've been sort of hanging here for quite a while trying to figure out what we can do with the trail types here. So you're thinking, Gareth, that something will be decided, schemed out, proposed by early summer, by June or so, and also at the same time, these discussions are they just particular to the what we're planning at, what we're hoping to do with the Western Common, or is this sort of general for all green areas within HRM, like could be Blue Ridge Mountains, the other ones too? I
mean, the discussions which we're having and learning as we go forward as far as access and inclusion are concerned, or they're going to cross-pollinate across what we would do in the municipality for all of our facilities and recreation infrastructure, not solely about the Western Common. But this is a great opportunity for us to learn and apply in real time, so that when we come up with plans for other parkland areas or other municipal facilities, we're more aware and taking the information from users and applying it appropriately.
Just a question. I think we talked about, I guess, Gareth, coming up with some type of a table that would capture the financial side with the commitments that, I guess the things that have been accomplished so far and looking forward. I'm thinking what Councillor Cuddle's talking about could be captured perhaps in a table. Like, we haven't really talked about even the budget for this year, for next year, for the year after. That's obviously going to be a huge factor in what portions of the master plan we're able to start moving with.
Yeah, that would be something I'd defer to my colleagues in Parks Capital. They'd be able to attend a future meeting, I'm sure, because they're ultimately the ones that oversee the budget on everything.
Right. And sorry, Mr. Chair, through
Oh, go ahead, Councillor.
through you. So, I mean, great point, Jane, about the budget, and maybe we can ask to put that on the agenda for our next meeting, to have a budget review. But we still have this trail back there that's half finished. That with the kind of big chunky gravel, hasn't been crusher dust. It's like in a state of kind of feels like it's still in a state of construction. I know last year we talked about the desire to at least see that finished sometime soon. I think we just need to really understand, like, what is it going to take to do that? Could we do that this year? Like, what can we, as a committee, what can we do this year in terms of advancing the vision for the Western Common and seeing at least that one trail moved forward into completion?
I completely agree, Councillor. I mean, Amy's sitting there at PRCC every day with a closed theoretical trailhead behind her, and people are out there all the time on it. And I've actually seen people on off-road bikes back there too, motorized ones. But it would be nice to have that properly finished, and whatever PRCC needs, be it cameras or paved parking lot or whatever's needed back there, probably lighting, to say nothing else, so that we can actually say we've got something done here. Would really be very nice. I think we got a little bit extra money somewhere there from the extra lands that were put over to the larger composting facility. And then there's what we haven't spent for the last couple of years and our annual budgets and all. So it should be possible to do something, I would hope. And so how do we exactly, how do we move forward and have that happen, Gareth?
Sorry. So you're wondering about how we could finish the trail site, how we could finish the trail behind Prospect Road?
Yeah, I mean,
so obviously currently it is our access point for trail construction. There is an opportunity, we brought it to this committee before, of bringing another access route onto the trail from the McDonald Lake subdivision. That was a while back now. I'd have to look through some minutes to speak to it in a little more detail. But that's something, again, that it needs to be taken back. Obviously, we all want to have some sort of trail section finish to this, or at least so it's open and accessible. But I'd be taking that back to Parks Capital again.
The trail itself, I can speak, like there's a huge volume on the trail every single day. Community members Dog walkers, a huge amount of dog walkers. We are having some issues with off-leash dogs. HRM bylaws, as we understand it, doesn't really permit that for at least our section. Not sure how that applies to wilderness area. Additionally, we do have a letter on file, probably from 2019, maybe 2018, Mike, to talk about the security camera needs and lighting needs at the back of the facility. So I can certainly bring that to the next meeting or forward it to Krista if it's not still on file. Yeah, but signage would be something we would definitely add to that. But the community is using the trail regardless if it's open or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I guess this just feels like part of it is who's in charge here? Like, who's in charge of overseeing this work and making this happen? Who's ultimately responsible for seeing this trail built?
I guess our project manager.
Parks Capital oversees the construction of the trail.
Is there a specific person there, Gareth, that is the project manager for this trail? For
that would be Alex Quinn. Alex has been at some meetings before. Yeah. So if we actually go back a ways, folks, and I'm a little murky on details. I don't have everything in front of me right now. One of the big issues that we were ultimately addressing, and why we were conserving some of our budget, was to address water crossings, specifically at Nichols Lake. There was some significant cost to that, particularly if we're going and continuing on beyond that with larger trucks to construct trail. But now, obviously, if we're not going beyond that and more going into a backcountry 2-foot wide trail beyond Nichols Lake, a different bridge can be selected. So there's some bigger issues which are being looked at from a capital perspective right now. But like I can't speak for what they're doing exactly over there. I'd be going out on way too much of a limb. Yeah.
So the discussions that you're having about trail type and all, Gareth, does that have to be completed before a bridge type has to be decided? I'm wondering, cart, horse, what has to go here?
Well, we haven't, a bridge type has not been finalized or selected, nor do I think, based on some of the preliminary designs, would we have enough money to actually build what they proposed. I don't even know if we'd have the funds to get the helicopter off the ground that is needed to do the bridge. So sorry to be glib, but we've always known that we had a challenging budget with this project. I believe it was $50,000 per year, and we were only getting so much out of that, and it became increasingly more challenging to forge through and construct this trail. But I think that they go hand in hand with one another. Like, we wouldn't want to select a bridge type over build a bridge that could withstand a ton truck to get across it, when ultimately we're never going to take that truck across it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess what would be helpful, and I don't know who does this or how, maybe it's me, maybe I make a motion at council. I mean, I kind of think that perhaps there's a different way of doing this if we can work with park staff to say, you know, what are the major pieces that need to be done? What is the cost of doing those major pieces, so that when we get together and we can talk, we can kind of start to focus and hone in on getting different pieces of this done. And if it requires capital, then we can start to discuss, well, where are we going to get the capital? But right now it feels like, one, we don't really know what the plan is. We don't know what the pieces of the plan are. We don't know what the pieces cost, and we don't know kind of where to go. So we just talk around in circles, and that's why we feel like we're not making any progress. So is there, back to, I guess, what I was saying in the beginning, like having, a timeline of next steps. Perhaps it's a project plan that we need, just something that we can look at collectively to say, here's the big picture we need to redo, reimagine the trail network based on the changing of trail types, with the master plan. We need to finish the trail piece from the Prospect Road Community Center down to Nichols Lake. We need to, look at, the bridge, what are the decision on that bridge. What is that bridge going to be? How much is it going to cost? Where are we going to get the funds? Like, we really need some kind of project plan. And I guess what we've been asking is, like, who takes that, that bull by the horns and makes it so.
So all of the budget for this is overseen and delivered on by Parks Capital. So that's this committee is advisory. At the end of the day, it's not overseeing any budgets. It's not making suggestions on how and when and why you would spend money. We come to this committee for advice at the end of the day, and those decisions in a project plan are then developed and implemented within Parks Capital.
Right.
So is it reasonable, do you think, Gareth, to get asked for Alex Quinn, or if he is the person, to come and give us his project update at our next meeting?
I think that would be great. I think that's exactly what this committee is looking for. By the sounds of things.
Do I have anybody moving that recommendation?
I move that we.
I second.
I don't even have to call it. I gather we're all in agreement then. All right.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn, come on down next time round. And if I may just jump in along the same lines, I believe, Amy, a while ago, PRCC put in a request for cameras or something, lighting. It was a while ago now.
It was.
Could you revisit that and have something for us for our next meeting of what you see is needed behind there? And at the same time, if you can get that out sooner than later and send it on to Councillor Cottle, since PRCC is an HRM building and property, it may be that there's a different pot. Some of that stuff could come out of nudge, nudge, Councillor.
Councillor, as long as you're okay with me updating the letter that we already have on file, we'll do a couple of amendments to it. It's all very occupational health and safety focused, just to keep our staff safe. They have to go behind the building. There's concerns around when the parking lot is developed back there. There's not adequate lighting, that sort of thing.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I'm just looking at our agenda here, and I missed something earlier. We had an information thing sent out about the Ragged Lake study for expansion of Ragged Lake. Now, there's not necessarily a presentation here, but there's somebody here that knows something about this that can speak to this, Krista?
So that was shared with the committee as just information sharing separate from the agenda itself. And I think I had a note that if you wanted to discuss it at the committee, that you would just add it as an added item. And that's certainly something you can do at this time to have a discussion about the expansion of the Ragged Lake. And Mike Weil is here to answer questions. So I would just need a mover and a seconder to add that matter and approval.
I'll move that.
Seconder, please.
I can second.
Thank you, Amy. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael Weil, for sticking around. We did not want to ignore you. I didn't realize I'd admitted you at the beginning. My apologies, sir. The floor is yours.
No problem at all.
If you could give us a little overview.
Certainly, and I'm sorry I'm clicking on my camera, but it's not, I think it's about to turn on. There we go. Good evening, committee members. It's Mike Weil. I'm the manager of HRM Acquisitions, Disposals, and Industrial Lands. So as indicated, and I understand the committee has been aware for some time that our office was preparing a report to council, an update report, and had been inquiring as to what that report may contain. I can inform you, as you've seen from the council report that went on February 8th, it was just an informational report. It's an update to council regarding direction they had given staff in 2018 to conduct the background studies to inform a secondary planning process for the potential expansion of the Ragged Lake Industrial Park. So this most recent council report did just that. It updated council as to what has been done so far, what steps are remaining, and presumably a next step once those studies are completed. Planning and development would take forward a recommendation for council to consider in initiating a secondary planning process for this potential rezoning of the lands around Ragged Lake for industrial expansion. This is getting quite dated now. Actually, I'm not sure how many committee members have been there for a long time. I know we started this back as early as 2014, and I recall meeting with the group, the committee, maybe in a different form, along with Peter Bigelow and Jan Skora back in around that time of 2014. Forgive me if I'm not remembering who all was there from the committee. It's been a little while now. So this in essence, as I say, has been going on for a long time. Planning staff wanted to take a fresh look at it, and in terms of having some more support for an industrial study to be conducted for HRM. So as you'll see from the report, information to report from council, that did touch on some of the additional industrial lands strategy study that HRM had undertaken in 2020, I believe is the date on that report. And I believe, as I say, that's included, or snippets of it are included within the council report itself. So for a general overview, I mean, that's essentially where we're at the time of the Western Commons plan and the planning for it. As I say, we would have been in discussions with Peter Bigelow, would have been the main parks manager at the time. The issue of where the final boundary would reside, where the final boundary would lay between the Western Commons and the potential Ragged Lake expansion, I guess, was never settled at the time and was always deferred to a later date. So we're pretty much just following up on that to have that consideration go through to council and see if we can get the process started and settle where things may end up. So that's the overview in a nutshell. If there's any questions from this material or what we're doing, I'm happy to answer that.
That's my dog, by the way. Yeah, so I think I was the one who suggested that we bring this forward to the meeting here. I've had a few conversations with Michael about this since I knew this report was coming forward, just about what the intention was with the Western Common, and how I did go digging through some of the background documents and see that these industrial lands are referenced very early on in the plan. I think they're actually referenced in that giant study that was done by EDM. I had a bit of concern because when we look at all the mapping of the Western Common, there is no mention in it of, in a lot of that mapping of the industrial park expansion. So, like I said, I did have to do a bit of digging, but I really thought it was important that it come to this committee so we can, one, be aware of what's happening, and two, ask some questions if we have any about, what the plans are, the timeline, where this came from in the first place.
Yes, I personally, I appreciate hearing about this. I was not aware, maybe I should have been, but I was not aware that this was out there. Quite frankly, I got to admit, I'm rather surprised by how large an area this encompasses, from the Ragged Lake that is now there, park, to this area here. It's massive. I mean, it actually kind of dwarfs what Bears Lake is, really. I'm just wondering, why is it, Michael, why is it such a large area?
For the intended type of use, it wouldn't really be considered an overly large area. The growth, I guess if you look at the gross acreage overall, as you would sort of generally outline an area, would have to keep in mind that there's going to be lakes and wetlands and trails and riparian buffers and that sort of land that would remain in a natural state throughout. So it's more or less following along the natural development within the park. I guess it's following along linear to the existing Highway 103, to where you would go out to the Otter Lake entrance. And then, of course, it extends over as far as Evergreen Place, where the compost facility is. And then as the speakers earlier in tonight's meeting were talking about expansion of some industrial use there. So it would seem to provide, that logical linear layout that would provide for extension of the additional entrance that's already in place at Otter Lake, Evergreen Place, and then of course Ragged Lake Boulevard. A total build out would contemplate an additional interchange. I guess it was always sort of called the Bears Lake Ragged Lake flyover, so a connection that would give you additional traffic benefits, I guess, if you will.
Yes, I remember that proposal from 20 years ago. At least.
It's been a while now.
I mean, the overpass concept, but building out
Yes.
Ragged Lake to this extent. I mean, for one thing, the boundaries here, they actually cross over the natural waterway from Big Indian Lake to Otter Lake, actually, if you're going to paddle up that way. It includes that, which I don't think it should, but it seems like a very large area to, and especially right up to the shoreline of Otter Lake. That doesn't quite seem right to me either, that the shoreline should be on the right on the edge of the lake of Industrial Park, even though it's close to the access road. I can understand why you'd want to take advantage of exit 3 for sure. But anyway, you've been discussing this for quite a while, so I guess there's lots more discussion to be had in the future.
Certainly, this would put it initiation of the secondary planning process, I guess, to the benefit of everyone, as it would put it out in that process of formal review, public participation. It just gets the benefit to have this put out to the light of day and studied with that full participation and feedback from the public. So with that, I mean, as the report mentions, we have a few more studies that are presently being identified through planning and development for any additional traffic or transportation or Halifax water study requirements that they may want the additional information before they're prepared to recommend the initiation process begin. So we're just awaiting those final details. And at that time, we'll have the studies commissioned, and then it'll be, I guess, an item taken forward to council for consideration of this initiation. And as indicated, we're certainly not working in isolation. As I say, when we began this approach way back, we've always been involved with parks. As I said, Peter Bigelow and Jan Score's group, and now with primarily with Richard Harvey and Doug Reed are our primary contacts. So it's something as we look at this is the area indicated. I'm not sure which map you're currently looking at, but what we had identified to council was the study area. So it's just an outline showing the area to be studied. Within that area, as I indicated, there is going to be, as you folks I'm sure are well aware of the land, there's going to be lots of areas of water courses, wetlands, buffers, environmental protection areas, areas just not conducive to slopes. So there would be a good, some good trailhead opportunities here as well, some good buffering opportunities for the parks. So we really think this can be developed, as a cohesive approach and keeping in the environmental and parkland aspects in mind. We think this could be a good collaborative project moving forward. And certainly initiate some good environmental benefits as we go along. And with the current focus that climate change and everything is getting nowadays, it's a lot of support for those types of initiatives as we advance.
Is there a concept that Ragged Lake might move into more of a retail park as opposed to just sort of a light industrial?
No, I'm glad you asked. Actually, the municipality, if you recall back in the original regional plan in 2008, HRM had looked at the industrial parks through the functional plan and had determined essentially it is not, the role of the municipality is not needed for retail land. That is being serviced by the private sector. There's plenty of opportunities for retail land out there. HRM does remain involved in the industrial land because that is not currently being served to meet demand by the private sector. And probably the main reason for that, along with the current shortage of land for all types of uses, but industrial land is typically a lower margin type real estate development. If you have land that's serviced and zoned, residential is going to be a bigger financial return, as would office or retail. So this is very much based on, and again with the industrial land strategy that this is based on, as well as a recent study. This is based on HRM looking to match employment lands with the population growth of HRM over the years to come. So, I guess net, as a general rule of thumb, net new employment requires net new lands. We're in a growing city. We're not in a city that had been a big city, contracted, and then is growing again, and we have lots of brownfield development opportunities. HRM has been on a steady grow, I guess, since its inception, really. So whenever we do expand, whether it's the population base for residential or for industrial employment lands, you're going to be getting into more greenfield development, I guess, as we go along. The study, if you do get a chance to read the industrial land strategy provided by Watson, it does provide some good background. It provides opportunities for densification of existing lands, which of course is a component of our project moving forward. But there is certainly the need for some net new industrial lands to provide for this new type of employment. And in terms of that as well, I should add that this has always been envisioned from the outset not to be heavy industrial. This would be mostly contained to logistics, warehousing, in building type activities, in storage. It's a relatively clean type of use. If you were to drive into the newer sections of Burnside, for instance, you would get a flavor of what type of buildings and developments this would be.
I think given the history of the area, this proposal is going to raise a lot of concern, particularly when you kind of, look at the heavier industrial use that's happening around Mills Drive with the scrap metal and C&D and all the garbage and debris that, kind of results from that activity. And in many ways, the community, feels that, you have the Otter Lake landfill, you have the composting facility, the list goes on of kind of these undesirable uses that have been put in this community over time, and there hasn't been there hasn't been a plan. There hasn't been a strong secondary plan which looks to balance the residential use with the employment use. So when this came forward, and Michael and I have spoken about this, and I've spoken about this with Burnside, and I've spoken about industrial parks and climate change, and what the opportunities are. I see that there is an opportunity to do something very different here. But one, you're not going to have the trust of the community in that, and one, I don't know if HRM has done something like that yet, where we could point to it and say this is like an eco-industrial park, something that's going to attract green tech and kind of quality employers and employment opportunities in emerging sectors. And so I think in some ways, with some vision, this could be an interesting idea. I'm not saying that I'm endorsing this in any way. I'm just at this point would be interested in kind of looking at what opportunities exist and how you actually make it work. And, back to the point of having employment near residential, whether you look at what's happening in the Prospect communities along the Prospect Road, and you look at Exhibition Park with the potential of development there, and you look at the connectivity between, this part of the city and Timberley and Lakeside and Bayers Lake and Spryfield, you begin to see from a planning perspective that it could be an interesting opportunity. The thing is that we just don't want to end up with what's happening over in Bayers Lake, where people are blasting the land to smithereens and bulldozing everything flat, and not taking into consideration the environment in any way. And so, because this is associated with the Western Common, I would imagine there would have to be some very, very high level kind of stringent regulations around how this is built and how it interacts with its natural environment. And with the opportunity to create trailheads, that's even, could be a bonus for people who are working in an industrial park to be able to go out in their backyards and jump in a canoe and go canoeing after work, or go for a swim at lunchtime. But it has to be done. It has to be done right. And so that's where I fit. On one hand, I'm like, okay, I see the opportunity. On the other hand, really nervous.
Well said.
Yes.
Go on, sir.
Certainly, if I can just add to that as well, you certainly raised some good points, and I guess it goes back to a point that the chair raised earlier in terms of why such a seemingly large size. Part of that is to properly plan a whole area together cohesively. Rather than get in and develop by 50 acres at a time and you end up with a patchwork of development over time, this would give a great opportunity to master plan an entire area, cluster-like uses, be able to have some of these eco-efficiency benefits, even down to clustering areas such as restaurants and medical facilities and whatnot. So you would get a much better approach if you plan out this in a larger area rather than, as I say, going by a piecemeal approach. And certainly, I mean, it does, there's lots of different categories, I guess, of environmental benefits. And I guess one of them is sort of along this lines of live, work, and play, to provide a major industrial employment lands within this area of the city that has a lot of existing residential surrounding it, hopefully preventing people from having to cross the bridge necessarily to work in Burnside, or businesses having to cross the bridge and then come back to service clients again is one of the common complaints we've had from businesses over time. So, I mean, it does provide some additional benefits, but certainly from our aspect, all we can do is we're providing the best advice we can to council. That's, we have identified that there definitely is a need. for employment, to keep employment growing. There is a need for employment lands, and there's relatively few areas that are conducive for this.
I believe the vice chair has a few questions or a comment or two.
Yeah, I like the idea the councillor is talking about, you know, if we're going to build something like this, or something like this is going to happen this close to our, you know, our protected area. I agree that, you know, I was part of the mountain bike community, and I was heavily involved in, you know, the Whopper drop area, that big mountain bike area up in behind Bayers Lake, and watching that get destroyed and flattened was, it wasn't easy to take. However, I understand, you know, there needs to be progress, there needs to be space for industry, and there needs to be space for all this stuff. I've been looking at the maps and been going back and the maps of the Ragged Lake area, and right off the get-go, I mean, yeah, it's a big chunk of land, and I get, Mike, thank you for explaining this stuff. It's, you know, I understand, you know, the size and the volume, but it also represents the top of the closest part to the city center of what we're trying to do here. So that's where I like where councillor's going with this. If it's, you know, there can be some integration of how the whole thing is going to work together on the top end. And like I said, some of these things, you know, they can be pretty ugly. Like, you know, there's nothing worse than, you know, driving through Toronto and all you see is warehouses slacked up along the 401. It'd be nice to see a tree every now and then. You know, so the 103, I don't know, maybe there's a buffer zone, maybe there's trailheads off Greenhead Road or off of Otter Lake. I happen to know that area very, very well. And, you know, there's lots of interesting topography. We've actually canoed from Blueberry Lake all the way to the ocean.
Oh.
And there's some pretty neat stuff in there. So it would be kind of a shame to see that. I'm not going to say get destroyed, but you know, you're paddling on Blueberry Lake and you're going out trout fishing. And it happens to be a very good hook and release trout fishery. And you're looking at an IKEA on one side of the lake, and you're looking at, you know, somebody's trucking company on the other side of the lake. So, you know, I'm hoping that there will be some consideration for the gem that's below that it's attached to. And I guess, you know, we can only hope and keep hoping.
I'm encouraged by the ideas that are coming here, and hopefully they can be passed up the line there, Mr. Weil. Yeah, because as you say, what's happening on the other side of Bears Lake right now is I'd love to know how many tons of dynamite were used up there. Good Lord. It's a rock graveyard for sure. It's not pretty. And I know it's windy as hell up at Canadian Tire now. I don't know how they're going to have more injuries, just people trying to get in that emergency center up there from being blown over by the wind than they are from people being naturally ill. Anyway, I think Councillor Cuddle, you had another comment, sir.
I was just in here about canoeing and seeing the IKEA on that mountain of rock. I mean, it's like
exactly
like no more. Not that. We don't want that.
And to further, sorry to cut in here, but to further with that point, I think Michael mentioned that, or somebody had mentioned that there's, you know, there's a lot of distrust in this neighborhood right now of what's going on. I mean, look at the stuff that's going on with the sorting facility, and
yeah,
you know, I mean, I live in the neighborhood. I live in Greenwood Heights. And, you know, just right from the survey that was put out from HRM, the way the questions were asked, the way it was almost like it was foregone conclusion, the way the answers were being driven. So, yeah, there's a certain amount of distrust. And
yes, certainly. We certainly do appreciate that. And as the councillor indicated from our discussions with the councillor and going right back to our original report on this in 2014, 2015, we've been looking to really truly brand this as an eco-industrial park. I mean, having the chance to start from scratch really presents that opportunity to do it right, to have the vision from the start and do that. You know, HRM now has its environmental team has grown substantially. It's quite a robust team now. They're actually now part of our division. So we like to work closely with those folks, and we'll be bouncing off lots of ideas as we go along, should this take off. Again, to truly try to integrate some of these major initiatives. You know, Burnside, for instance, again, in the newer section, I think Eastport Properties, John Lindsay's group had announced that I believe they built the first net zero carbon warehouse building in HRM just a couple of years ago. So some of the trends of that and encouraging, and, you know, the opportunity HRM has, this would require a new zoning, of course, because it's not presently zoned for industrial. And the extra benefit, of course, when HRM sells its industrial park inventory, we also have building and site development requirements for those new buildings and the development of the site. So it gives HRM an extra layer of regulation, if you will, to be able to help control what does go on these properties. So it's not just we're not land developers. We don't just develop land to sell it for the dollar. We develop the land for economic development, and you know, as well, to help take incompatible uses from residential areas that should be an industrial area. So, you know, we're trying to serve the purpose of industrial employment lands here, and that's the goal. And having the chance to work in a great environment like this with an economic or not an economic, ecological tint on it, I mean, would be a great opportunity.
And just jumping back to the background, I mean, this whole area came into being because it was not needed as a backup water supply for Halifax anymore. So, I mean, it was a very pristine area and had been kept that way for many, many years.
And it is.
And it certainly would be nice to keep that up. And if we have to expand an industrial park, it'd be very nice to be able to make that very, very green friendly. That would be might be an interesting selling feature.
Yes, and for anybody that may remember, I mean, this goes back a long way, but a good portion of this Ragged Lake and Western Common lands was industrial holding lands back pre-amalgamation, and I think that continued on actually for a while after amalgamation. I've been here since 2003, so I think a couple years before that, I believe it was formally sort of put into the holding zone, I guess, for Western Commons, but it had always had a target, I guess, of industrial based on its location.
Yeah, a small portion of it, yes.
I see that Amy, does Amy want to speak?
I just wanted to hit on kind of the eco aspect, environmental aspect as well. Like Ragged Lake, as far as I understand, it does house a bus depot, but none of our communities, including Ragged Lake, is serviced by public transit. So I work for the not-for-profit that operates the community center. We have massive hiring implications because we're not serviced by public transit. So there's that piece, but then there's also the environmental impacts and the transportation infrastructure that we have on the road, where if you're putting employment opportunities there, it's just more stress on both of those issues. So the public transportation piece really has to be considered as part of the overall plan as well.
Yeah, certainly, and that raises a good.
I was just going to say, Amy, to your point, I mean, we've actually talked about that with both Exhibition Park and this industrial park. Even before then, I'd like to see a park and ride transit happening there at the very, very least. But that's another discussion with another department.
I believe Doug Reed has a comment or two. Unmute yourself, Doug. There you are. I can't hear you, sir.
Doug, you're unmuted. You should be good to go.
Are you speaking? I can't see or hear you. No? Maybe your mic is,
I was gonna say, the other option too is Doug could leave and either try and rejoin or try calling in.
do you have a preference, Doug? Do you want to leave and come back? Wave your hand, or I saw your hand up before, but it's not raised anymore.
It's Gareth here. I just messaged Doug, just tell him to leave and come back, just in case he's having some audio and microphone issues. But it seems he might be coming back.
Okay, he's still up on the screen there. Okay, no, he's muted now. Maybe he's... So the next step, Michael, in your process, when does that come about? What's your next milestone in discussions?
The next step would be us getting any further required studies to have planning and development be at the stage that they're prepared to take this forward for council's consideration for initiation. And once we have those studies complete, hopefully that council initiation would take place quickly. And after that, we would be in the formal process of a secondary planning process. So I think, as I indicated from the start, I think that would be a great milestone to achieve, because that does open everything up to the public input and process and further studies. So, it'll be a great milestone to hit. Again, we're just, we recognize the environmental implications, of course, of any greenfield development. So we don't take this lightly. And all we can do is provide the best recommendation we can. We feel this is a good location with some viability. And either way, I guess, the municipality really needs to know, if this isn't the location, then, there has to be a lot of work to determine where will be the location for additional industrial lands if we're going to look to expand our population and economic growth.
Very good. Mr. Reed, you're back again. Let's try again.
I did get a message back from Doug. It's Gareth again. He sends his regards and his apologies.
He popped up. I saw his face for a second.
Yeah, it keeps cutting out on him for some reason. So hopefully he can join us in a minute here. For those of you that haven't met Doug, he works with my team over in policy and planning of Parks and Recreation, but hopefully he'll be able to join in.
That's frustrating for him.
Yes, and he stayed at the office just so he could have a solid connection. So that's particularly challenging. So.
Well, that is quite frustrating then. Anyway, Amy, glad to while we're waiting for Doug to come through. Yeah, welcome. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Yeah, I was able to participate just as a community member when meetings were in person. So certainly was up to date as of COVID, I guess, happening. So March 15th, 2020. And glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Yes, we're pushing for a while to try and get a rep from PRCC there, and it took a whole COVID interval to have it happen.
I think almost a year right to the day, close, I think.
Anyway, things move slowly sometimes. So Hopefully Doug will be back. What else do we have on our agenda here? This is, oh, well, we could talk about our next meeting schedule here while we're waiting to see if he can join us here.
Yes, and
What do you
Mr. Chair, you'll need mover and seconder and motions to approve your meeting schedule.
Yeah, I don't have it. I thought I had one. I don't know where it is. It's not. I presume one was sent out.
Yeah, I have the dates here. I could read them out.
I'll put them in the
Okay.
chat as well. I'm just pulling up the information. It was attached to the agenda package.
It must have been in the other part of.
I was gonna say, you and I can certainly connect, you know, on a later date before the next meeting to determine, you know, best action for you.
Yeah, no, I thought I had it all because I had I printed a lot of stuff, but clearly not enough. So what do we have there, Counselor?
Oh, well, February 23rd, check.
Okay.
May 25th, August 24th, and November 23rd.
Okay,
I'm happy to move the meeting schedule as presented.
any second? Is
Second.
that you, Hamad?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Everybody all in favor?
Right.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so moved and passed. All right, so do we have, oh, we have a phone call
Doug
coming in.
Reed with us now, yes.
Perfect.
Doug, can you hear us? Star 6 to unmute your phone.
Good evening. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, welcome.
I apologize for the issues in getting on. I was actually watching the video on the YouTube and then got the invite to join the meeting after Michael started his presentation, just because I was going to add as a point some elements in terms of the review that had been done right through the work. I just wanted to highlight that my name, by the way, is Douglas Reed. I work alongside Gareth in policy and planning within parks, but in terms of the work that had been accomplished by real estate on Ragged Lake, the Western Common Advisory Committee had been informed back actually in January of 2020. And if you look to your agenda, like the minutes and former presentations, you can find an update sort of presentation that we made at that time, which sort of highlighted where this information was stemming from the 2018 report that Michael referenced. I was hoping I could put up online, but of course now with the issues, I don't know if I can present that. But in the idea that it's important to note that the 2 points from Mike's presentation that matter the most was the idea that no sort of boundary line had been determined between Ragged Lake and Western Common. And so that was part of the 2018 report. And obviously when you look at a map and you see some boundary lines for the study area that they were doing, that's suggesting that that's just for the study area, not for the actual potential expansion. So I wanted to make that first point. And then the second point was to reaffirm that the information report that had gone to council in January, it allowed for planning and development to be sort of making the next consideration. So the advisory committee would likely want to be informed by planning and development staff as this matter proceeds for consideration for secondary planning. I'm sorry to take an additional 2 minutes of your time to say that, but I thought it would be useful in terms of context for where this report came from.
Well, thank you very much, Douglas. Yes, I think on behalf of the committee, I think we would appreciate very much being updated as things move along.
Yep. Excellent. All right then. And again, I'm sorry for not being able to join you through video conference.
It's not for lack of trying, sir.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Technology often gets the best of us.
Yep. No problem.
Okay, do we, well, we've had a few minutes here, interesting discussions. We've had lots brought up. Krista, do we, so we have Alex Quinn. We've passed that we are inviting him to come and give us an update at the next meeting.
Yes.
So that's in our meeting minutes. Excellent.
I guess
Is
if
there
we
anything
wanted to
else?
have a site, any type of a site visit before our next meeting in May, what's the best way to set that up?
So members would, so in terms of site bids, because it's not an official meeting, that's something that if members want to connect with each other, I believe you have each other's emails, you could certainly connect and set up a time to meet up. If you're looking to have staff, walk you through or reach out to Stephen Adams, I do have his contact information. I believe Councillor Cuddle also has his contact information, and we could certainly make those arrangements for you. This would be done sort of separate from an official meeting, but you could certainly speak to it at the next in the May.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm thinking it'd be nice to have it before the meeting if possible.
I agree. I'd be interested in that. Maybe after this meeting, we could send around an email thread just offline to see when people might be available.
I mean, I'm very interested, but if you folks can arrange something in April and want to do it, I'd welcome to hear how it goes. I am being optimistic. My wife and I are saying we're going to go for it, and we usually try to spend much of April down on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and we haven't done it for the last 2 years. And we're double vaxxed and boosted, and we have our N95 masks, and we're going for it. So I will be gone as of the middle of March until about the 12th or 13th of May. So unless we do it the week before the meeting on the 25th or the 2 weeks before, I won't be available. But I'll be at the end of an email if anybody's sending emails out and wanting to arrange it if the weather gets nice. I'm banking on the weather not being nice, so I'm not going to be here, but I hope for your own sake it is an early spring.
All right.
Enjoy your travels.
Absolutely.
It's a bit, after being locked down, it's feeling a little odd, to be honest with you, to contemplate. But I'm driving. I'm not going to get in the plane. No hurries to get in the plane.
I'm doing that on Sunday, going to Portugal for a month. Fingers crossed.
We are still live, Mr. Chair, if you want to look for a motion to adjourn.
Well, we're talking about all the wonderful things we're going to do. So, yeah, so if we adjourn, we can have a little talk after, I presume.